Goldilocks didn't intend on getting lost in the woods that day. She'd been in a terrible argument that morning and ran off into the forest surrounding her village. It didn't take long before she realized her mistake. And in a panic, Goldilocks spun around looking desperately for any sign of which way was home. After what seemed like hours, she came to a hill and climbed up to do a quick survey of the surroundings, hoping to see something familiar, but she didn't. The sun was still peeking through the treetops above, but night would soon be approaching. This thought made her heart pound. She had to brace herself against a tree to keep her balance. She felt faint and knelt down. While she waited for it to pass, Goldilocks caught the scent of something familiar. She raised her head and inhaled deeply. It was smoke. Goldilocks followed the scent through the dense foliage until she came to a clearing with a small path of trampled grass cutting into a field. Goldilocks saw the smoke was coming from a little cabin. She approached the front door and, with some trepidation, knocked on it. There was no answer, so she knocked a bit harder, and this caused the door to swing open slightly. Goldilocks stuck her head in and called out, "Hello, is anyone here?" She took a few steps inside and looked around. There were light blue curtains framing the windows, a large, colorful throw rug on the hardwood floor, and a bouquet of wild flowers in a vase atop a round dining table. Encircling the table were 3 chairs, each a different size and each marked with a letter carved into the wooden backrest. Along a wall, there was a stone fireplace with a large iron kettle and smoldering embers. There was also a sweet smell of cinnamon drifting about the room. Goldilocks' stomach rumbled and reminded her she had not had breakfast that morning. She approached the dining table and saw 3 steaming bowls of porridge with cinnamon sprinkled on top. Goldilocks wondered why anyone would make their breakfasts and then disappear. But whatever the reason, she was famished, and the food smelled so good she couldn't help but sit down to eat. As Goldilocks finished the contents of the smallest bowl, she noticed a ladder in the corner of the cabin. She climbed up and found 3 beds. Each one was a different size with a matching letter carved into the headboard, just like the chairs. Those beds looked so inviting, and her exhausted legs agreed. Goldilocks slipped off her shoes, climbed under the plush covers of the smallest bed, and fell fast asleep. She awoke in a startle to the sound of voices talking below her and wondered how long she had been napping. It was hard to hear through the floorboards, but every now and then one of the voices would rise in volume and Goldilocks would catch part of the conversation. Goldilocks was about to climb out of the bed when she heard the ladder creak. She quickly pulled the quilt over her head, but left a small opening in which to peer out. A large, dark mass was slowly coming up into the loft. Goldilocks covered her eyes and lay there motionless. She heard floorboards creak, followed by the sound of a nose sniffing the air. "I smell something strange up here," said a deep voice. The ladder again creaked. "Oh dear me, yes, I can smell that too," said another voice. Goldilocks was terrified. Her heart was racing. A wave of cold sweat swept across her brow, and her stomach twisted into a huge knot. She was going to be sick. Goldilocks threw the quilt off and managed to lean over the side of the bed just as her stomach emptied its contents all over the floor. Goldilocks stared at the mess she'd created for what seemed an eternity until a voice finally broke the silence. "Are you okay?" Goldilocks slowly looked up to see 3 large grizzly bears staring at her. The littlest bear asked again, "Are you okay?" "Yes, well, no, I'm not sure," said Goldilocks. The mother bear looked down at the porridge on the floor and raised an eyebrow. "Sorry about that," said Goldilocks. The father bear, with a scowl on his face, asked Goldilocks what she was doing in their home. "I was lost in the woods," she replied. "I found your cabin, and nobody was home, so I entered. I was so hungry and so tired, and I'm just really sorry." The bears looked at one another. "Your human village is miles away from here, little girl," said the father bear. "We better leave now if you want to get home before dark." So the four of them headed out, back into the woods where Goldilocks had been lost only hours before. They reached the forest edge outside her village at dusk, just as the fireflies were coming out. Goldilocks thanked the bears for their kindness and apologized once more. They nodded their heads collectively and wished her well. She watched the bear family disappear back into the woods, and then Goldilocks turned towards her village, and with a heavy sigh, she headed home.